Picture this: unlocking your partner's tablet and discovering hundreds of sexually explicit comments they've left on young women's photos, women the same age as their own daughter. In just a few scrolls, everything you thought you knew about them shatters. This isn't just another story about online infidelity. It's about the moment you realize the person sharing your bed might be hiding something far more disturbing than you ever imagined. In our increasingly digital world, this question haunts more relationships than ever before. Today's story comes from a woman in her late 50s who made a disturbing discovery about her boyfriend's online behavior, one that crosses multiple boundaries and raises serious questions about trust, respect, and age-appropriate conduct. But this isn't just another tale of digital infidelity. It's a story that forces us to examine the very foundation of modern relationships and the complex ways technology has reshaped our understanding of faithfulness and betrayal. You build a life with someone, share your deepest truths, your morning coffee, your future plans, only to discover they've been living a double life online. How many of us have wondered what our partners do in their private digital moments? When does curiosity become surveillance? When does online interaction cross the line into infidelity? These questions aren't just academic. They're the reality many couples face as they navigate relationships in the digital age. What makes this story particularly compelling is how it intersects with issues of age, wisdom, and life experience. At 57, our storyteller thought she was past the games and drama typical of younger relationships. She and her partner had explicitly discussed boundaries, especially regarding online behavior. They'd both agreed that at their age, transparency and respect were non-negotiable. Yet here she was, facing a betrayal that seemed more suited to teenage drama than mature adult relationships. As we dive deeper into this story, consider your own boundaries. What would you consider a deal breaker in your relationship? How would you handle discovering your partner's hidden digital persona? And perhaps most importantly, can trust ever truly be rebuilt after such a discovery? Let's explore these questions through a story that touches on modern relationship challenges we're all still learning to navigate. She wasn't looking for trouble that Tuesday evening. After 18 months of building what she thought was a mature, honest relationship, she was simply searching for a recipe on her boyfriend's tablet, something he'd encouraged her to use countless times before. But as she opened the browser, his social media notifications popped up, and her world stopped. There, in plain sight, were dozens of notifications from young women, all responding to explicit comments he'd left on their photos. What caught her eye wasn't a message or a like, but a string of comments he'd left on various photos. As she began to read, her world slowly started to crumble. These weren't innocent interactions on family pictures or hobby groups. Instead, she found dozens of sexually explicit comments on photos of women young enough to be his daughter. The comments were graphic, detailed, and clearly part of a pattern that had been going on for months. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through comment after comment, each one feeling like another crack in the foundation of trust she'd built with this man over their relationship. The age of these women, many in their early 20s, made the discovery even more disturbing, especially given that her boyfriend had a daughter just a few years older than some of them. She noticed patterns in his behavior. He would often comment late at night while she was asleep or during his lunch breaks at work. This wasn't random or impulsive. It was calculated and deliberate. The content of his comments revealed a side of him she'd never seen. He would describe in explicit detail what he wanted to do with these young women, often using language that made her physically ill to read. Some of the women would respond, encouraging his attention, while others remained silent. But what struck her most was the sheer volume of these interactions. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment or a moment of weakness. This was a systematic pattern of behavior that had been going on for months, possibly years. As she sat there, tablet in hand, the weight of this discovery pressed down on her chest. How could the man who brought her coffee every morning, who talked about growing old together, who played with his grandchildren every Sunday, be the same person writing these vulgar comments to women in their early 20s? The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Every memory of their relationship now needed to be reevaluated through this new, disturbing lens. When confronted with the evidence, her boyfriend's reaction only deepened the wound. He immediately dismissed it as just a mistake, a phrase that rang hollow given the systematic nature of his actions. This wasn't a single moment of weakness or a random occurrence. These were deliberate choices made repeatedly over time. His initial response was telling. Instead of showing genuine remorse, he became defensive and tried to minimize his actions. "It's not real," he insisted. "They're just comments on the internet." But this defense ignored the deeply personal nature of his interactions. He had spent time crafting these messages, engaging with responses, and returning to the same profiles repeatedly. Each comment required multiple steps, finding the photos, typing out his thoughts, hitting send, and often returning to engage further. These weren't impulsive actions. They were calculated decisions made hundreds of times. What made the situation even more painful was their previous discussions about relationship boundaries. They had explicitly agreed that any form of infidelity, including online behavior, would be a deal breaker. They had both emphasized the importance of honesty and transparency, especially given their age and life experience. Now, watching him scramble to minimize and excuse his actions, she saw a different side of the man she thought she knew. His attempts to downplay the situation as not real cheating and just comments showed a fundamental disconnect in their understanding of respect and commitment. He tried to turn the tables, accusing her of overreacting and invading his privacy, classic manipulation tactics that only served to confirm her worst fears about his character. The man who had always presented himself as mature and respectful was now revealing a defensive, immature side that seemed more suited to a teenager caught misbehaving than to a 55-year-old man. As the confrontation unfolded, she noticed how his story kept changing. First, it was a mistake. Then, when pressed, he claimed it was just harmless fun. When she pointed out the pattern, he suggested he might have a problem and needed help. But this felt like another manipulation tactic rather than genuine remorse. The more he talked, the more he revealed about his true character, and none of it aligned with the person she thought she knew. The age of the women involved added another layer of disturbance to this betrayal. At 55, her boyfriend was actively seeking out and commenting on photos of women in their early 20s, women the same age as his own daughter. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It raised serious questions about his character and judgment. The psychological implications were profound and disturbing. Imagine the cognitive dissonance required to be a father of a 24-year-old daughter while simultaneously making sexually explicit comments to 22-year-old women online. How could someone compartmentalize their mind to such a degree? The community's response to this aspect was particularly strong, with many pointing out that this behavior wasn't just inappropriate, it was predatory. Several commenters noted that a man their age should have the maturity and wisdom to understand why such behavior is problematic, making his actions even more inexcusable. The age dynamic also revealed troubling patterns in his personality. Was he seeking out younger women because they were less likely to challenge his behavior? Was there an element of power play involved? These questions led to deeper concerns about his relationships with younger women in general, including his interactions with his daughter's friends or younger colleagues at work. The trust was broken not just in terms of fidelity, but in terms of his basic judgment and character. Many community members shared similar experiences, describing how discovering such age-inappropriate behavior changed their entire perception of their partners. One woman shared how finding her 60-year-old husband commenting on college students' photos made her physically ill, especially when she realized some of the young women were younger than their own granddaughter. Another described how her partner's fixation on younger women revealed deeper issues with aging and masculinity that eventually led to the end of their relationship. The psychological impact on our storyteller was profound. She found herself questioning every interaction he had with younger women, wondering if his friendly demeanor masked darker intentions. The fact that he could so easily separate his role as a father from his online behavior suggested a disturbing ability to compartmentalize and rationalize his actions. This wasn't just about inappropriate comments anymore. It was about fundamental questions of character, judgment, and moral consistency. The online community's response to her story was overwhelming and nearly unanimous, offering a powerful blend of support, wisdom, and righteous anger. Experienced voices chimed in with their own stories of similar discoveries, emphasizing how such behavior rarely exists in isolation. The collective wisdom of hundreds of responses painted a clear picture. This wasn't a simple mistake, but a pattern of deliberate choices that revealed fundamental character flaws. Particularly powerful were the comments from other women in their 50s and 60s who had faced similar situations. They spoke about the importance of maintaining standards and self-respect, especially after decades of life experience. At our age, one commenter wrote, "We've earned the right to expect better. We're not 20-somethings anymore, wondering if we're being too picky or overreacting." This sentiment was echoed repeatedly. The idea that with age comes not just wisdom, but the responsibility to enforce higher standards. Many community members broke down the psychology behind his behavior and excuses. They pointed out the classic manipulation tactics, the minimizing, just comments, the deflection, you're overreacting, and the false promises, I'll never do it again. Several relationship therapists weighed in, explaining how digital behavior often reveals deeper character issues that wouldn't otherwise surface in day-to-day interactions. The community emphasized that being single in your 50s is far better than compromising your values for someone who doesn't share your moral compass. They shared success stories of women who left similar situations and found genuine happiness, either in new relationships or in embracing their independence. "I'd rather spend my golden years alone than with someone I can't trust," became a rallying cry of sorts. Perhaps most valuable were the practical steps suggested by those who'd been through similar situations. They advised documenting everything, seeking counseling for personal support, and having a clear exit plan before confronting the situation further. The community stressed the importance of having a support system in place and not letting shame or embarrassment prevent you from reaching out to friends and family. Standing at this crossroads, our storyteller faced a decision that would define not just her current relationship, but her self-worth and all future relationships. Her boyfriend's actions had violated not just their explicit agreement about online behavior, but also the implicit trust that comes with a mature relationship. The evidence was clear. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, but a pattern of deliberate choices that revealed a troubling side of his character. Let's break down the crucial steps for anyone facing a similar betrayal. 1. Document everything. Screenshots, dates, patterns of behavior. Don't let gaslighting make you doubt what you've seen. 2. Assess your safety and financial independence first. Have an exit plan ready before any confrontation. 3. Remember, his response to being caught reveals more than the original behavior. Minimizing, deflecting, or blaming you are major red flags. 4. Consider the pattern, not the promise. Real change requires acknowledging the full scope of the behavior, not just making empty apologies. 5. Trust your instincts. At 57, you've earned the wisdom to know when something feels fundamentally wrong. This was about fundamental questions of self-respect, boundaries, and what she was willing to accept in her life. At 57, she had decades of life experience to draw from. She'd seen friends stay in compromised relationships out of fear or convenience, slowly losing pieces of themselves in the process. She'd also witnessed others who took the harder path of leaving, only to find unexpected strength and joy in their independence. As she weighed her options, the words of the community resonated strongly. At their age, there's no room for second chances when it comes to fundamental respect and trust. The question wasn't just about forgiveness, but about whether she could ever look at him the same way again, knowing he was capable of such behavior. Could she sit across the breakfast table from him without wondering if he'd spent the previous night leaving inappropriate comments online? Could she trust him around younger women in their social circle? The psychological toll of staying was another crucial factor to consider. Choosing to continue the relationship would mean accepting a new role as monitor and enforcer of his online behavior, an exhausting and ultimately impossible task. It would mean carrying the burden of suspicion, always wondering if he'd just gotten better at hiding his activities rather than actually changing them. Perhaps most importantly, her decision would send a message, not just to him, but to herself and others in her life. Staying might suggest that such behavior was forgivable, that boundaries were flexible, and promises could be broken without real consequences. Walking away, while harder in the short term, would demonstrate that self-respect and dignity have no expiration date. Now I want to hear from you. What would you consider the bigger betrayal? The explicit comments themselves, or the fact they were directed at women his daughter's age? Have you ever discovered a partner's secret online behavior? How did you handle it? At what point do you think online interactions cross the line into infidelity? Share your thoughts below. In today's digital age, the lines between appropriate online behavior and infidelity are constantly being redrawn, but some principles remain constant: trust, respect, and age-appropriate conduct. The community's response highlighted how such discoveries often reveal deeper issues of character and judgment that can't be dismissed as simple mistakes. For our storyteller and others in similar situations, the lesson is clear. Maintaining strong boundaries isn't about being rigid or unforgiving. It's about valuing yourself enough to walk away from situations that compromise your dignity and self-respect. This becomes even more crucial as we age. With decades of life experience, we've earned the right to expect better, to demand relationships that enhance rather than diminish our lives. The digital aspect of this story raises important questions about how we define infidelity in the modern age. Is it just physical contact? Emotional connections? Or does it include the kind of online behavior we've discussed? The consensus seems clear. Any behavior that requires secrecy and violates agreed-upon boundaries constitutes a form of betrayal. In many ways, digital behavior can be more revealing of character than real-world actions, as people often feel freer to express their true selves behind the shield of a screen. And perhaps the most valuable lesson is about the importance of trusting our instincts. Too often, especially in long-term relationships, we ignore red flags or make excuses for behavior we know is wrong. We tell ourselves we're being too sensitive or overreacting. But as this story shows, those initial feelings of discomfort usually have merit. When something feels wrong, it usually is. As we navigate relationships in the digital age, the key takeaway is that it's never too late to stand up for your values and demand the respect you deserve. Whether you're 25 or 65, you have the right to set boundaries and expect them to be honored. Technology may have changed how we connect and communicate, but the fundamentals of respect, trust, and dignity remain unchanged. In the end, it's not about the platform or the specific behavior. It's about choosing to surround ourselves with people who share our values and respect our boundaries, both online and off.